All right, hello, and thank you for tuning in to Night Dreams Talk Radio Network on nightdreamstalkradio.com. Today is Sunday, April 14th, 2019, and it is about 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I am your host, Ronald. Tomorrow would be my father's birthday, Ronald Robert Farnham, who would have been 82 today. All right, I've been promising you a very special guest, and he is finally here tonight. He is the author of the paranormal conspiracy book, Skeleton Dolls. That's right, Skeleton Dolls. You heard me right, Skeleton Dolls, that you can buy right now on Amazon.com. And he's also a brilliant musician. And for more than 35 years, he's been playing music across the earth with the world-famous Steve Miller Band. But tonight, we will be discussing his fascinating book that is based on a true story. And I just finished reading this book, Skeleton Dolls, today, and it is amazing. And now, joining us on the line from Pacific Palisades, California, or I don't know if it's San Luis Obispo, the author of Skeleton Dolls, and the world-famous musician himself, Kenny Lee Lewis. Hello, Kenny Lee.
Hey, how you doing?
All right, I'm doing good, man. It's good to hear from you. I haven't talked to you in a long time. We've communicated through email, but, I know you've been busy. And we have a 1-hour show. So before we get into everything and I start asking you questions about your book and your writing, do you have a fan page or email address or contact info that you want to share with your listeners and the readers so that they can send you letters and responses about your book?
Yeah, they can just get in touch with me through my main website, which is kennyleelewis.com. And there's an info email contact thing at the bottom. And they can send me emails there.
All right, cool. And what was that again, the website?
KennyLeeLewis.com.
KennyLeeLewis.com. That's KennyLeelewis.com.
That is correct.
All right, cool, man. So now, like I said, I read your book, and it's fascinating. And it's on Amazon.com where people can buy your book, Skeleton Dolls. Which I think is a really interesting title. And it says there on the website that it's based on a true story. Now, tell me, how did you get involved in writing this story?
Well, I was already a writer. I've been a songwriter for many years, and I started doing columns for magazines like Guitar Center and the Smithsonian Native American magazine. I also did some other, I can't remember all the different things I got published on, but actually got paid for. So I was already a published writer, and I wrote a screenplay many years ago with my friend Billy Peterson, and there was this weird guy that we met in a shack one day who was helping us cut bait, and his name was Ron Farnham. Is that you?
Yeah. That's me. I'm going to mention that later. Yeah, that was a fun time working on that movie with you, man.
So anyway, moving forward to your question, I was already a writer in the sense that I was making creative text and was in the literary world, other than being just a songwriter. And after the movie just kind of went on the back burner, I, of course, was hanging out a lot with Billy Peterson's girlfriend, who I don't know if you ever met her. I think you might have. Yeah, you met her.
Yeah, I have pictures with both of them.
Diane. Yeah, you met both Diane and Carrie, and they were identical twin girls, lovely women that we were, doing a lot of fun stuff with, hanging out with you, going boating. They would come up to our cabin in Montana. They helped us strip bark off trees in bikinis, and, some of those became uprights on our deck there, and they were just really a fun couple, and eventually I made it up to Minneapolis, where they had grown up, and I met their mother, Muriel. And Muriel was a horsewoman, and as her daughters were, and she started telling me stories about what they were like when they were little, and being identical twins who actually spoke in twin speak, which is a documented phenomenon that occurs in both identical and fraternal twins, but specifically a lot with identical twins because they share a placenta and their DNA is identical on their helix, and so they're very different people. I mean, when they're going through the world and going through life, they're very connected on a lot of different levels, unlike, normal siblings would be. Um, so she started telling me stories about the language they spoke in, some of the things they did as kids, and one of the things was this incident where a horse that they had fallen in love with when little had gotten old and ill, and when they were off to preschool one day, the parents decided that they were going to euthanize this poor, blind, old horse, and the girls were so distraught over it when they returned from school, because the parents just said, because they said, well, we want to ride the horse. Where is it? They said, well, we had to send him up to horse heaven, and he's up there now having a great time grazing in green fields. Don't worry about him; he'll be fine. But they were just totally distraught over the whole thing, and they even bought a little colt for them to try to assuage their, their grieving. And what happened was that they got up one morning and this is all a true story.
Yeah.
They got up, held hands, went into their speaking language. According to them, this is what they think that they did because it was so long ago. They were only about 4 or 5 years old, I think, at that time. And they went out in their bathrobes and their cowboy boots out into the property, and the parents had buried the horse almost a mile away in a very secluded little glen that they had never told the girls about. And the girls could feel and sense the presence of where this horse had been buried.
Right.
And so they went out and sort of divined their way like a water wick would do. And, oh, God, I'm looking at a California quail right now right outside my window. Hi. Anyway,
cool.
He's looking right at me. That's why I said that. So they went out, and they were actually able to find this burial site, which had been grown over already by grass and everything from the spring. And they took their cowboy boots off, and they started to dig this horse up.
Yeah.
Why, I don't know. Even the mother didn't know. And eventually they started to exhume all the bones out of the grave and tried to assemble the skeleton of the horse so they could write it again, because they wanted to resurrect it, because they missed it so much that they had it in their minds that they had the power to do this. This is all a true story.
Yeah.
So I'm hearing this from the mother, and I'm going like, holy shit. I said from the mother, I said, holy crap. I said, the hair is standing up on my arms just hearing this story. And I just asked, I said, look, I said, I don't know if this would bother you or not, but I'd love to kind of take this and run with this as a story, because this is just fascinating to me. Because eventually they didn't know where they were. They woke up in the morning, the kids were gone. They called the cops and everything, and they were trying to find him. And then the mother got the notion, oh, I bet you they're at the gravesite, because that's the way they are. They're kind of scary. And sure enough, that's where they found him, all covered with this, horrible, gross situation on a cadaver that had been underground for 6 months, and flies everywhere. You can imagine the scenario. And the kids were just blissed out. They were totally happy. They said, "Look what we did! We put him back together. We're going to get him, and we're going to get him up, and we're going to ride him." And of course, and the mother, who was a biology teacher, had to explain to them, "This isn't going to happen. The muscles and the tissue are gone now. You can't do this."
Right.
And they just didn't understand. So. From there on, I novelized it beyond that in a Dan Brown, Stephen King-esque style.
Interesting. Yeah, because
that's how I got into writing the book.
That's interesting. That was, for me, that was the laugh out loud line in that book, is when the twins in the story are standing over the bones that they had reassembled, and they said, "Mom and Dad are going to be so proud of us." And I was reading it, and I laughed out loud. I thought that was hilarious.
Well, that's the way the mother described it to me in her own words. And like I said, she gave me permission to go ahead and use the story, but they just didn't want to be mentioned. Of course, I've given all the names away now, except I didn't give away the last name, did I? No, good.
No.
Okay, so they're still kind of like, they're still kind of invisible. But, they've got copies of the book, and they thought they got a kick out of it. Although, because it was novelized beyond that, they didn't really, relate to any of the other parts of it. But they definitely related to this scenario of this exhumation of their horse. And the other thing that was interesting is when I was at their house, they took me down into the basement of the house, and they actually had the skull of the very horse that their parents had shot in the head with a .30-30 carbine, with a hole right in the middle of the skull. They said, "Oh yeah, this is the skull of Red, our horse.
Jeez.
So I got a
Wow.
picture of that thing. And that was another thing that was my inspiration, was thinking about this horse. And on the artwork on the book, on the spine, you can actually see that skull on the exterior of the book. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. I see that right there in the middle of the spine. So that's the real skull.
That's big. So that's Red. That's Big Red. That's the actual name of the horse.
Well, yeah, in the book he's called Luke, is the one that they...
I'm sorry. Red came later, right?
Yeah.
Colt. Sorry.
Yeah.
See, now I'm confused. Yeah.
That's okay.
That was the original horse, and that was the skull, and they actually still have that skull.
I'll keep you on track because I know it's been an amazing day. Tiger Woods won another major. I saw you posted on your Facebook page.
I posted that on Facebook. I can't believe it.
Yeah, I liked your page a little while ago, and that post because I thought he would come back and do a good job, and he has, and I'm glad for him. So yeah, Luke comes back later on in that story, and he saves the
Well, yeah, that's where the doll part comes in to the title, because looks like Luke isn't going to stay in the grave after all.
Yeah, it's such an interesting story. I really like your writing style for this book. It reads fast. I mean, the chapters are short and they're intense and they're engaging. Did you write it like that intentionally? It's almost like a screenplay. I mean, it's 473 pages.
Some of it I did, but when you get in the editing process, a lot of things are removed, especially when a book that long gets done, because you're trying to make it so it's not like the Bible, for crying out loud. You're trying to make it so it's accessible. People get their arms around it. So what happens is you delete a lot of the fat, and then when you do that, the chapters still have to remain in their integrity without trying to combine them. And so that way, then that's why they get so short, because you take a lot of fat out, and then you just move on to the next chapter. Most of the time when I write, I like the chapters to sort of end in that new modern style that you see in television series now, which is pretty much every scene as it cuts to commercial as a cliffhanger.
Yeah,
every one.
Totally.
So that's the way I do. That's the way I construct my chapters. So you can either put the book down and be really, really looking forward to the next chapter, or in some cases, and some of the only criticism I've ever had on the book is that people just saying, I couldn't get any sleep, I had no life, I had to read the next chapter every time. It's like, thanks a lot for ruining my life.
That's how I felt. I mean, it's a real page turner, definitely.
Yeah, it's a good kind of criticism, which I don't mind, and that's the kind of the style that I sort of naturally started doing even before I watched, Game of Thrones or Breaking Bad. I never even watched any of those shows before. Now I'm noticing when I'm watching those on reruns that was kind of the style that I was already developing when I was starting to write this story.
Yeah, well, you did a great job with it. All right, so let's see. In Skeleton Dolls, Kevin, the father of the twins, he seems to be like a representation of kind of the common person who doesn't understand the ways of like the esoteric mysteries that your book reveals, like when Bessie the cow communicates with Kevin's wife Maggie in the early part of the book. Now, is that kind of what you wanted to do with that character, Kevin, the father?
Yeah, of course. He's the flyover state farmer, an everyday red-blooded American guy that just... He doesn't believe in any hocus pocus, and he's just kind of very conservative and kind of common sense, country boy.
Is he kind of? Did you ever meet the twins' father? Is he kind of like that, or based on him a little bit?
He's actually a dentist, and they were divorced when they were probably about 12 or 13.
Oh, okay.
So they had a divorced family situation.
Right. Is Skeleton Dolls your only book? Do you have other books?
No, I have other books, but this is the first one that I ever self-published on my own for the public because it was pretty PG. I had written one prior, sort of like a parallel of like my life with Billy Peterson, who you know, of course, from the movie we met on, about her cabin, Montana fishing, infidelity, rock and roll groupies, just the whole curse of being in that part of the entertainment industry where you become sort of a sexual icon, and you have to deal with, adoration and idolatry from the audience, and you have to put it into perspective. And so that book is an interesting book. That was the first book I wrote. It's called Coconut Fire, but I've never put it out because it's pretty blue. I mean, it's got a lot of sex in it. It's like 50 Shades of Grey level.
Right.
At the time that I wrote it, I still had kids living at home, and I just couldn't come out with that as my debut book.